Whoever wishes to investigate medicine properly should proceed thus. In the first place, to consider the seasons of the year and what effects each of them produces, for they are not at all alike, but differ much from themselves in regard to their changes. Then the winds, the hot and the cold, especially such as are common to all countries, and then such as are peculiar to each locality. We must also consider the qualities of the waters, for as they differ from one another in taste and weight, so also do they differ much in their qualities. In the same manner, when one comes into a city to which he is a stranger, he ought to consider its situation, how it lies as to the winds and the rising of the sun, for its influence is not the same whether it lies to the north or the south, to the rising or to the setting sun.
That's a quote from Hippocrates on airs, waters, and places, which was written in 400 BC. It's a paper all about how the environment has an influence on public health.
Yeah.
And it was the first of its kind, and it predated that kind of thinking by like 600 years.
Yeah, this is kind of the subject of our episode today. We read that based almost solely by, I found it, I heard about it because it's not something I knew of its existence before. And I was like, oh, there's this old Greek kind of medical, kind of ecological book called On Airs, Waters and Places. That's a really nice name.
Yeah.
Let's discuss it. But
then proceeded to read it.
And it's largely kind of, doesn't go very deep into those topics, let's say.
No, it's just saying the people that live in this area have these characteristics and...
Yeah, it's about 20 chapters or 20 little books.
Yeah.
Each of them basically describing a peoples of a certain area and saying, this is why they look like this is why they act like this. And it's definitely kind of a racist ethnography, which I think right out the bat we want to distance ourselves from. We're not in any way celebrating that, endorsing it, agreeing with his kind of very outdated, well, I mean, it was ancient times, view of different people.
Yeah.
But we still think that the document has some worth.
Yeah, and even in medicine, it's been proven that some of his findings were foundational to modern thinking.
So today we wanted to discuss those findings.
Yeah.
And especially when compared to the modern person's relationship with nature in our 21st century industrialized world. But before we get into that, Alicia, we watched a movie last night called First Cow, or we started it.
Yes.
We streamed it online because, of course, all the movie theaters are closed. I remember we saw the trailer for this a few months ago. It's an A24 movie, so we were excited by that immediately. It has a really cool narrow aspect ratio, and it looked very grainy and quiet and naturey. It's kind of about, what would you say, the gold rush in the US and pilgrims looking for gold or something like that?
Yeah, so it just it mainly follows one man going through. It's very slow, it's immersive because of how slow it is. But then all of a sudden, 2 years will pass or something, he's still just kind of trekking to the Yukon, I think. It's just so quiet and, you're just out for a hike in the woods, stopping at little, towns on the way.
Yeah.
Meeting people, meeting animals, foraging for mushrooms.
So I would recommend the movie, even though I fell asleep during it. But that's just because it was very late.
Yeah, and we haven't finished it yet, so...
I liked the way that it had a lot of loud nature sounds.
Yeah. And the score was kind of cool.
Yeah. Those were kind of to the forefront of the sound mixing.
Yeah.
And I never really watched a movie like that.
Yeah, it was neat. I also have read a book since we recorded last. It's called Girl with a Pearl Earring, based on the painting by Vermeer. And it was just a really good book. I read it in a couple days. And if you're looking for an easy kind of romantic read, I'd recommend it. It's cool. The main character is a maid, Griette, and she is working for the painter. Then she's falling in love with someone. And it's just a cool little book. Give it a read if you're interested in a love story.
It sounded very neat.
Yeah.
You know what else is a really cool little book?
What book?
Hippocrates on Airs, Waters and Places.
You're right.
So, you know what? Let's skip all the small talk and get straight to it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll check my notes. The first note says, mention and denounce his various kind of racist ethnographies. And I think we did that.
Yeah, check that off the list.
The next thing is just a general topic, which is the intersection of health and the environment. Especially, I guess, as it relates to climate change.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what Hippocrates was all writing about, which is that, as I mentioned in the quote in the beginning, he was saying that the health of a people's depends on the health of their waters
The air.
airs and
Yeah.
the soil, I guess, the fertility, the land, because that's what they rely on.
Yeah, and Hippocrates was one of the first people to look at medicine from a non-religious point of view. So he separated medicine from like religion, and he was saying if you have this ailment, it's likely not because of some kind of curse.
Yeah.
More likely it's because of water, genetics, or like plague.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I mean, he still had some, views which today were kind of laughable.
Yes.
But I guess that is very advanced.
Yeah, and he was, like, he's the first person to have done that, and he pioneered that type of thinking, which saved a lot of lives, because some people maybe would be deemed untreatable because of they'd done something so bad and therefore they got sick. But he said what he was doing was kind of treating people with natural remedies, kind of how people are treated today. Like, he treated diabetes by saying change your diet and exercise.
Right. But, I mean, back then, there were no kind of pharmaceuticals.
True.
So that was kind of their cutting-edge science, I guess.
Mm.
So I guess he took ailments seriously, viewed them as treatable, however odd the science might seem today sometimes.
Yeah.
As opposed to just writing it off as, it's a demon, got to
Yeah.
do some kind of ritual. Which is obviously good for the patient.
Yeah. I feel like there's a little bit we can learn from him, because for a while there, I feel like we were getting really into, like, prescriptions for everything, and maybe that's like a very American thing I hear about. Less so in Canada, but it's like if you have a heart problem, they're like, take this. If you have diabetes, it's like, take this. When in reality, those types of diseases could be treated by lifestyle changes.
A lot of them, yeah.
Yeah.
And especially prevented.
Prevented, that's a good point.
Because sometimes my biggest issue with prescriptions is that
like, as soon as you stop taking them, it's going to come back, maybe.
Well, that's true, but also it only deals with the symptoms and not the cause. No one tries to stop these issues at their roots. You mentioned diabetes.
Yeah.
I know there's type 1 diabetes, but like obesity is a huge issue in the Western world, and it is strongly correlated with diabetes.
Yeah, and asthma as well. It's like you can have asthma, but then if we cleaned up the air pollution, then there'd be way fewer asthma attacks.
Yeah. So forward thinking in medicine. Neither of us are doctors, but I guess this will kind of be the medical episode or the medical episode.
Yeah.
One point that I had on this intersection of health and the planet was that obviously there are the kind of concrete medical issues caused by environmental problems, such as air pollution causes respiratory problems and lung disease. Drought and famine, they have their obvious effects. And so does unclean drinking water.
Yeah.
And those are all kind of structural, either development or society problems, infrastructural, or obviously being onset by climate change. But I want to talk about this kind of abstract sense of vitality which we may feel when we're out in nature.
Okay.
Which seems to me a little bit of what was the kind of undercurrent of what Hippocrates was writing about.
Yeah.
He kind of uses words like strong and having vigor, or he talks about your appetite or your sexual appetite or things like that. We both experience that, right?
Yeah,
You
when
go
you're
outside.
out in nature, you feel stronger, maybe more awake.
More awake
Says
is
the
a
girl
great
who
word
just
for
woke
it.
up from a little nap.
Yeah, sleepy girl. But yeah, you walk outside barefoot and you're getting some energy.
Yeah.
You feel, I suppose it's spiritual. I suppose it's some kind of
Placebo?
I suppose it's some kind of placebo. But I don't know, it feels real enough. Feels like you're kind of being energized. Maybe I'm talking more about the mental health aspect of it, because you feel at peace, you feel meditative, you feel connected with the world and everything. But no, I think there are like definite physical effects you get from walking.
100%.
We talk a lot about running,
Yes.
and we say running at the gym on a treadmill versus maybe on a track versus maybe on trails or in the city. And we kind of have our preferences because the act is the same, the act of movement is the same, but your surroundings, and it's what your feet are touching basically, and what kind of air are you breathing. And that seems like something that Hippocrates would maybe use, as an analogy.
Yeah, for sure. And just being outside, it's proven that it's good for your mental health, and then your mental health has impacts on your physical health. So
yeah, maybe it's kind of an indirect thing like that.
Yeah, but what I kind of mentioned when I read this book, I thought to myself, none of this is like rooted in actual modern science.
No.
However, it's kind of stuff that people who aren't scientific people would know. Like, so you have like a grandmother who has these like remedies and these things she would say to you, and then she's not a doctor by any means, but it's stuff she's just kind of absorbed from living.
Well, old wives' tales,
Yeah.
or as you'd call it, like a common sense,
Yeah.
quote unquote, common sense. I don't know the place that has in medicine, but maybe it has a place.
Yeah. It was an interesting read for sure, though. And it kind of reminds you of how simple some things can be. It's like if you're feeling sick, drink more water. Or like...
There's also this thing about alternative medicine, though.
Yeah.
Especially as it relates to, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And there's talks about people who are against vaccines.
Yeah.
Or big pharmaceutical medicine, typical hospital practices, modern science in general when it comes to treating their bodies. And I wanted to talk about this thing of superstition.
All right.
Because the grandma who you just described, often it's hard to distinguish that from the superstitious anti-vaxxer, or as Kanye, in his presidential campaign recently, described vaccines as being the mark of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ironically what Hippocrates was getting away from, right?
Yeah.
Because he was distancing medicine from religion, as you were saying.
Yeah, and superstition.
Yeah, and I feel like conspiracies, the Dark Ages, those kind of medieval beliefs might be on the rise a little bit.
No, you're right. That's a good point.
Which is worrying.
Terrifying, yeah. Because it's like if they find a vaccine for the coronavirus and then half the people refuse to take it, it's going to be like just tough times for like a long time.
If you guys are interested in what we're saying about this, you can listen to our episode Coronavirus and 5G.
Yes.
Because we went deep into conspiratorial thinking, I guess.
Yeah.
And the corona one especially. Reading on As Waters and Places, I made a connection to another kind of old school, I didn't know how old it was, idea of the four humours.
Mm-hmm.
And those, basically, the idea was that these were four substances which constituted
human body.
The body, kind of. You know, they knew there were bone and skin and other thing, but basically they thought...
They're like the liquids.
Yeah, the liquids. Everyone had a different balance of these four substances.
Yeah.
Called humours, each of them, and each one had an effect on our personality.
Mm-hmm.
Hippocrates is... And I was thinking, wow, this is a lot like that, because he was wrongfully associating ethnicity or location with personality and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I checked it out, and Hippocrates was actually the one who came up with this idea of the four humours, so felt good for making that connection. They were black bile, which induced melancholy and laziness and fear, yellow bile, which induced aggression, phlegm, which induced forgetfulness and low-spirited nature, and blood, which induced being social and enthusiastic and vigorous and all those things. And that's kind of superstition, you know, in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
We had this idea when we discussed the coronavirus and 5G conspiracy. We were like, well, it's not all bad because it's kind of a useful symbol. People think that a new technology, 5G, is causing a health issue. So people are distrusting technology. So I wanted to make the point that often in these superstitions, you know, it's effectively nonsense science and it's untrue, but they're not worthless because there's metaphor and allegories to be made.
Yeah, and if you're trying to confront someone who believes in one of those, you have to try and make the actual connections that they say, okay, 5G is causing health issues, but you'd have to map it out and say 5G is causing you to be more lazy, causing you to eat worse, spend less time with people, therefore you're having this health issue.
Right. You can often find good in ill thought out beliefs, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to just disregarding the whole thing, which is why we wanted to do an episode on this.
Yeah.
And discuss on As Waters and Places, because as we said, and reading through it, I just kept getting deeper in and thinking, this is just nonsense.
Yeah,
what are we going to talk about?
More like off the walls as you went through.
Yeah, and just kind of irrelevant and less valid.
Yeah, not even inspiring near the end. It was just like, what?
Yeah, but it's not a worthless document, as you mentioned.
It's also inspired, even just the title of it and how it was the first document to make the relationship between public health and the environment. it's inspired a lot of other, what would I say, like, kind of in pop culture, even though it's in academia. So, like, there was a Harvard paper that we both stumbled across, and it was a collection of 3 different articles, all by the same author,
Okay.
David Levin, and it was on airs, waters, and places. So the first one was called Changes in the Air, the second one, Troubled Waters, and then the third one, Changing Places.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very interesting, I've learned a lot from reading that. I would 100% recommend it. It's an easy read, but it just gives really specific examples of how polluting the air, the water, and like how changes in water content in the atmosphere are going to impact us and are already impacting us.
Yeah, and not even a lot of people know the kind of obvious ways. You look at
Mhm.
like mega cities and there's a ton of smog and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But there was that one fact about how increased CO2 in the atmosphere is going to make our food less nutritious, our crops less nutritious.
Yeah, there's an experiment going on, and it's set up in a few different countries. So it's all over the world to see, like, humidity and stuff, how it affects it. But there's an inner ring of crops, and then there's rings that go out. And as they go, they, like, pump CO2 into the atmosphere right above them in different concentrations. And it proves that there's less nutritious in iron and a few other, like, kind of the heavy, or the metals that are in our systems. So, yeah, it's kind of scary. We'll have to do a lot of like genetic modifying to ensure food remains nutritious.
Deeper down the rabbit hole to undo the issues
we're
making ourselves. I like that story because it's kind of like the Corona and 5G thing.
Mm-hmm.
We say, okay, more CO2 is going to make the food worse, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need to know the science of it, because even in cartoons, we refer a lot to Studio Ghibli movies. There's just kind of this sense when people are depicting environmental degradation artistically, or climate change, it's a very kind of apocalyptic, wasteland. Things are barren, things are not growing, the airs are gross, people are sick, the land is infertile, maybe the water's polluted, it's hard to find water. I think we know this instinctively, but the fact that it's being proven now scientifically is, and Hippocrates was saying it 2,000 years ago as well, is worth something, is substantial, and more people could know that.
I think so.
One thought I had reading this was that we talk a lot about early education and how we've mentioned to ourselves that health and the functioning of the human body and proper lifestyle should be taught from a younger age.
Yeah.
Even just body parts, how things work, how to, I don't want to say like do cleanses, but things like how to, proper nutrition.
Yeah.
Or,
no, but like even just when I got acne at like in my later teen years, I was like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, there must be a definitive way of how to handle it, but it's not taught. It's not even commonly known.
No, acne is a good example.
Yeah.
Or
even if you get a scrape, it's like,
how to take care of yourself.
Put a Band-Aid on it? Like,
first aid.
Yeah.
Gastronomy, sexual health. More about exercise, because we kind of do gym class, but not saying everyone needs to know the science of like calories burned or whatever, but biomechanics is what I think I'm talking about. You know, how to run properly. Like a lot of people don't know that. Or posture. Like that's something I think could be taught in schools.
I think so. Because it's not like it's controversial.
No.
So,
teach kids about it would only better the populace.
Exactly.
So that's something I was thinking about, was that this intersection of environment and health is something that could be taught in school.
100%.
Things like getting clean air, drinking lots of clean water.
Mm-hmm. Getting outside.
Yeah.
Taking care of your mental health.
Some other examples I found of, or I thought of just very quickly when I thought about like our modern seclusion from nature, is that, hey, everyone has widespread vitamin D deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always inside. Like always.
Yeah.
And also the effects on our joints of walking and running on pavement all the time, rather than grass or sand or whatever natural substance.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess one question I had was, what does a proper connection to nature for our own health look like today? Because we can't be just nomads living outside.
Yeah. I think making it a priority in your day to spend time outside. In yoga, my teacher, she once told me, even because we have like really harsh winters, and there's some days like you actually, like you can't go outside, you just get frostbite. So she said, just stand with your face in the window, or go outside, bundle up everything but your face, and like get sunlight on your face for like 10 minutes, and it will change your entire
Day.
Yeah.
It'll lift up your spirit.
So I think just being in the sun, like absorbing the sun rays, because that's good for your skin, it's good for your mental health, as we've said, it's just good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one priority.
Definitely.
Another thing I'd like to see more is like sleeping outside.
Ooh.
Because I rarely do that. We camp and I sleep in a trailer, and I'm not a big fan of that. But I mean, my sister got a hammock, and she sleeps outside in it, and I would like to get one because it seems really fun. And like, I just think it would do something to you. She said she's never slept better.
Wow.
And she's like a bit of an indoor kid. Not really, but like, she would never be the type to like be espousing the virtues of like sleeping outside, saying you need to like go try and sleep outside, especially to me, because I was like, I'd be like, yeah, I know, but she was going on about it and like telling me all about how great it was to like wake up and like look at the stars and stuff like that. So I feel like some kind of incorporating sleeping outside, because that could even happen in cities. Like my old apartment building had that like
little balcony.
But it was like a big balcony. You could put a tent out there.
A communal balcony.
Yeah, so like some kind of like making it more accepted to like spend even evenings outside.
Yeah. No, that's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, restaurants, walkable streets would do that a lot.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to go inside if you wanted to go to the club or party or whatever.
Yeah.
Do it on the street.
Good point. Street parties.
I spent a large portion of last summer sleeping outside.
You did?
Just because I wanted to try it.
Mm-hmm.
It was very nice.
Yeah.
Because you could see stars.
And it's just like, it's not silent, but it's like the perfect amount of noise, I imagine.
Yeah. I'm lucky enough that my summer job is almost all outside because I work at a garden center, so I'm constantly basically watering plants, weeding, moving plants, pruning them, seeding, doing everything kind of plant related. And we have all different types of plants, ranging from big trees to small flowers. And I have definitely felt that has made me feel stronger over the last 2 years. Not that it's especially tough labor, which is like tough to me up or anything, but just the fact that I'm outside for like 6 to 7 hours a day.
Yeah.
Every day. It makes me happier, definitely. Yeah. Feels more natural because I've worked indoors before and I don't really like it. And we have a lot of places on campus. Most of the study spaces don't have a lot of windows. And that's not so nice.
No. Even like, where was it that my bedroom at home has almost no light now because a tree has grown outside my window. And it's like, I just either have some light where you're working or like, maybe jobs should begin to try and find ways to allow their employees to be outside.
Yeah, maybe that should be in the job code or something.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be a law. I don't know. That might be impossible.
I think so, but like in the future as buildings are being build
right.
courtyards and like glass
courtyards
areas. Yeah, courtyards are pretty cool.
Another example I had was eating fresh food.
Yeah.
You don't have to be plucking it off a stalk and then eating it straight away, although I like to do that. But there's just something about freshness. Makes you feel fresh. You are what you eat.
Lovely point. Maybe trying to, because we live in an area where there's a lot of stuff you can technically eat in the woods around us.
Yeah, learn what you can forage.
Yeah. That's something I never do, but like it'd be cool to learn. Even there's like wild blueberry plants and stuff.
We saw fiddleheads growing a couple months ago.
We did. That was exciting.
And I'd never seen those wild before.
Yeah.
They're these little curly Nova Scotian thingies.
Yeah.
Greens, I would guess.
They're kind of remind me of asparagus in their texture.
Very low growing. You said you never tried one before.
But I've seen them.
Oh, yeah. You can tell the texture just by looking at it?
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I just had a few more examples of like how climate change is impacting airs, waters, and places. That's
Go for it.
So there's the obvious things that we all kind of know about, but one interesting thing that I found was as there's water shortages and people begin to maybe like store water on their balconies and stuff, you know, like in little pots uncovered, apparently that's like prime breeding ground for mosquitoes, which then spread Zika and malaria and stuff.
Oh, really?
So the changes in the water have a ton of health, like disease spreading impacts.
Yeah.
Also, like low water and poor sanitation systems lead to the transmission of like dysentery and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So like bowel disorders, and it's just, yeah, the water thing is like kind of the scariest. Then there can be floods, which then like push all of this polluted water into like people's homes, and then they're breathing it in. It also, once an area is flooded, or there's a hurricane that goes through and people are like rebuilding, there's a ton of really horrible carcinogens in building materials, and even the stuff that's sprayed onto couches to like waterproof them and stain-proof them, it just gets breathed in, especially if you have to live there while your house is being rebuilt.
Yeah, industrial formulas are kind of worrying because they're rarely tested properly.
Yeah, and as ozone, O3,
Yeah.
that's ozone, as that reacts with these things, like it's been proven, but there's no regulation to stop people from putting these carcinogens in paint and everyday household materials.
Worrying.
Cleaner is like really, really bad. So like anything with a pine spray, it reacts with ozone and like you breathe it in and it impacts your lungs. It's just like
That's very scary, but
I know, it's terrifying.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, just so everyone knows. And I would recommend reading those articles to learn more.
Just so everyone knows, every product will shorten your lifespan.
On that fun note.
On that fun note, I had a lighter question.
All right.
The title was On Airs, Waters and Places of Hippocrates' seminal work. I was going to ask you, what's your favorite airs, waters and place? Your favorite type of airs, waters and places?
Okay.
I'll go with mine because I've thought about it.
Okay.
Mine is kind of like an alpine setting where the air's really cold and when you breathe, it feels like you're drinking. That's how refreshing it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
And all your sinuses are really clear because of it. Maybe a little bit of saltiness, but you're not on the ocean, but it's just a touch of saltiness.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. Oh, and a lot of evergreens growing. Because I've been working with evergreens recently and I really have come to appreciate their nettlesome beauty.
Nice.
And they smell good too.
Yeah, mine's pretty similar. I would like to be in like the foot of a mountain in like a little river. But I can't, like, I think that's true. I like the ocean. I'll go with ocean then, like the beach. But I don't like when the air is humid and you feel like you're slicing through it to get a breath. I like when
to get bread?
To get breath. So let's say ocean at like sunrise, because the air is usually thinner then.
Yeah.
Really scientific. It's not as humid in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And like things are just getting out of their damp phase, which things are like around here in the mornings. So,
nice.
Beach.
Another question I had was, we already kind of denounced Hippocrates and his
racism.
Yeah, his racism, his way of describing peoples as their personalities dependent on the nature around them.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought we could do one of our own that wasn't racial or ethnic, but rather based on, I guess you'd call it, instead of an ethnography, like a historiography.
Okay.
Maybe. Basically, we could come up with one of Hippocrates' chapters, but for our time. So for 21st century industrialized society, what would he think of the people and why would he think the people are the way we are?
Yeah. I think he'd come here and he would be like, I can see the air.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, that must be doing something weird to there.
Yeah. He would say the air is black and so that's why everybody is so cynical and lazy. Because it's rising, it's causing an increase in black bile and phlegm.
Sure. Fair. And then he would look at the nature.
That's the airs.
Yeah, so then he'd look at like the soil and stuff and be like, why is this just sand?
Well, he would say, where is the soil?
Yeah, true.
Because he'd look down and
then he'd like punch it and be like, why is it?
stepping on concrete.
Yeah.
And all around him he'd just see buildings.
Yeah, so he's like, this must be why people are so jaded.
Yeah, this is why everyone's so hard inside.
Yes.
Everyone's heart is so hard.
Selfish, yeah.
And then the next one is the waters.
Again, you'd see it in a plastic water bottle.
That's true, it'd be commercialized.
Yeah.
And it would have like an Evian label on.
Yeah, he's like, this is why everyone's a sheep.
Hippocrates is like a really conspiratorial hipster.
Yeah.
Only drinks the freshest spring water out of like a leather, what do you think they call those things?
What are those
a moleskin, a moleskin like water bottle.
Yes. So yeah, what would that make the people like that drink? What does drinking out of plastic water bottles make people like?
I would say something like a lack of identity, because it's not coming from where they are.
Hmm.
So there's a lack of identity and a general sense of dissociation from themselves and the world around them.
Great point.
So that's that. I think it was kind of a meandering episode. It went here and there. Let's try and conclude and say concisely, what is the value of this book in today's world, and especially in the climate change discussion?
I'm going to say one, not to dismiss people just because they sound conspiratorial, maybe.
Yeah, there are different ways. Let's say there are different ways of having knowledge.
Okay. Yeah.
Which sounds kind of wishy-washy and relative, but it's true. Not everyone is smart in the scientific way.
Yeah.
Hippocrates had a lot of things right, but he wasn't right for possibly like scientific reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, he didn't say this directly, but something like, on this intersection of environment and health, thinking of the planet as an organism. I always like doing that. It's kind of like the Gaia hypothesis. And thinking of climate change as a sickness on it.
Yeah.
I think that could resonate with people.
I think so. And then 3, I'm going to say remembering how dependent we are on the environment, and that the health of the environment impacts our health.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to communicate to people the impacts of climate change, to say when you litter, you're directly impacting the health of someone.
Yeah.
Because no one would want to do that. If every time you litter, you were to hit somebody and give them a bruise, they'd probably be slightly less likely to do it, even though people aren't super empathetic. But it would be, you would say, oh, I'm actually hurting someone. People tend to be kind.
Well, yeah, and in one of my courses last year, we talked about, I don't remember the academic name for it, but it's basically methods of framing. How are you framing your argument when you present it to the public?
Mm-hmm.
And essentially the most effective ones were financial and health. Health was the most effective way of framing an argument. So let's say there's a new product and people want it banned, and they want it banned largely for environmental reasons, but let's say there's also a risk that it will affect people's health. It's more effective if the activist group wants to talk about it affecting people's health.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's not disregard that when we're talking climate change.
Cool.
I often kind of forget it, but it seems important.
Yeah.
On that note, hope you all enjoyed this episode.
If you're interested, you can follow us on Instagram for some more behind-the-scenes type stuff, some ideas, and some inspirations about how we want to build a better world.
Yeah, that's @the_environmental.
Great. Thanks for listening.